Now we come to Denny's original company. This is the one he has a controlling stake in, How Music. So we're told that Denny actually started his career as a record producer. He founded How Music, which is one of the world's leading music labels. And it was responsible for lots of popular stars in the 1980s. So a leading player in the music industry, undoubtedly, but we do know that music labels are not as powerful as they used to be. Denny had great skill, we're told, in the area of artists and repertoire. So he was a talent spotter, someone who went out, found bands and musical artists and brought them to the studio. He's particularly good at identifying acts that have mass appeal. So he's keen commercial instincts and seems to have a track record in identifying talent that will have a broad appeal. He's also capable, it seems, of thinking outside the box. He has a novel approach, for example, in bringing this opera singer to produce albums of him singing popular songs in the operatic style. Teal and Variety, when you think about it, is the perfect way to identify acts like this, people with mass appeal. It's not just Denny relying on his own judgment, as good as it is. He's being aided by the public vote and audience reaction. So he's gauging all the time how the audience is reacting, how the public is reacting. And undoubtedly, he must be thinking to himself, okay, I'd be onto a good thing here if I could sign this singer up or this act up to my record label. So again, this brings up questions of conflicts of interest. Denny owns 75% of How Music, so absolutely the majority shareholder here. It's a private company and very little is known about it. So it seems that maybe CIMA is paving the way for potential concerns about this company. We don't know a lot about it. Denny is becoming a more interesting figure. He's becoming potentially a more problematic and ethically suspect figure. The Company Act of Teelands doesn't require private companies to publish much information. So again, it leads to very little being known about How Music. Denny is very, very wealthy, we're told. Hundreds of millions of dollars in net worth. And it says, again, just to emphasize the potential for conflicts of interest, it says there's no formal link between Evestar and How Music. So all transactions between these two companies should be conducted as if they are independent market participants and not closely linked through a common founder, which is the case, of course, with Denny being the founder of both companies. We think about related party transactions and the disclosures that might need to be taking place for related party transactions. There's a potential here for, I think, arrangements that benefit individuals rather than shareholders. The chief individual who might benefit, you would think, is Denny. If he's funneling these artists who are becoming popular on the show, on the Teal and Variety show, if he's funneling them into his own record company, it's certainly in Denny's interests, but maybe not in others' interests. So we move on and we have a look at Evestar's board. I've hinted that there are some issues here with corporate governance. And later on we're told that the board is actually strong when we look at the SWOT analysis for Evestar. But we really have no way to know that from looking at the below, because you have the names of the board members, you have their titles, and absolutely nothing else. We know nothing about their experience. We know nothing about their qualifications. Very little is known. Denny White is the one we know quite a bit about. And the first thing that jumps out is that there is no separation of the CEO and chairman roles. This is one of the tenets of good corporate governance. When you have the CEO and chairman role combined, it can be potentially problematic. Denny, as well, we have to think of him as the head of the company, setting the ethical tone for the rest of the company to follow. If Denny is kind of a suspect character, then that's going to trickle down to the rest of the company and have an influence on the ethical tone that runs through Evestar. Ethics, of course, is a huge issue at strategic level. You can be sure that there will be some part of one of your questions that touches on ethics. So very little to say about the composition of the board other than there's maybe a little bit of a lack of balance between non-executive directors and executive directors. So there are 3 non-executive directors, and then we have 6, let's say, executive directors, including Denny. So we have a finance director, that's Ed Lanson. You'll be interacting probably during the exam with Ed quite a bit. There's a creative director. There's a production director. Health and safety director, that's interesting. And quite a good thing, because we'll see later on that in fact Evestar is exposed to quite a few risks when it comes to the filming of these shows. And then a HR director is quite standard. We're told then a little bit about the TLAN Code of Corporate Governance, which is based on a comply or explain principle. So the corporate code of governance in TLAN is not setting out precise rules to follow. Rather, it's suggesting that there is compliance, but if a company is not complying with a certain suggestion, they're asked to explain it. And the idea here is, just like in the UK, in real life, that the market decides whether the company's standards are adequate. If a company wants to follow its own standards rather than comply with the standards set out by the Corporate Governance Act or the code, they can do that. But the market then will decide whether those standards are sufficient or not. So there's no formal sanction, of course, for not complying with the code. Does it open doors to potential abuses? I think maybe for a company that is ethically challenged and doesn't put corporate social responsibility at the core of what it does, then perhaps it does open the door to some abuses. And you would think, having read what we have read, that could be the case for Evestar. So we're told Evestar is not compliant with the code in respect of separating the roles of Chief Executive Officer and Chairman. But the board does justify, they explain why. So at least they've responded with an explanation, and they argue that Mr. White, Denny, is uniquely qualified to act as both CEO and Chairman. He's the founder of the company. He's been the driving force behind its growth, behind its development. He's central to everything they do. He's got a lifetime of experience in the industry. All of this leads me to believe Denny, it seems, has just got too much power. Who's acting as a check on Denny's power? The company is so bound up with everything Denny that it's hard to see how it would survive if something happened to him. Again, it comes back maybe as well to the cult of personality. As Denny wielded such influence over the other board members that they just step aside and let him act as he wants to act, rather than acting in the interests of the shareholders as they are meant